Now, the West continues to warn that Russia could invade Ukraine imminently. Yesterday, Boris Johnson told a security conference in Munich that the omens are grim and that an attack on the country would echo around the world. I sat down with the Prime Minister after his speech and asked him how soon an invasion could happen.
I'm afraid that that is what the evidence points to, Sophie, and there's no burnishing it, there's no hiding it. The fact is that all the signs are that the plan has already, in some senses, begun. That's what our American friends think, and you're seeing these provocations now in Donbass. You're starting to see this, these explosions and so on that we've been warning about for a long time. And I'm afraid to say that the plan that we're seeing is for something that could be really the biggest war in Europe since 1945, just in terms of sheer scale. You're looking at not just an invasion through the east, through the Donbass, but according to the intelligence that we're seeing, coming down from the north, down from Belarus, and actually encircling Kiev itself, as Joe Biden explained to a lot of us last night. And you know, I think people need to understand the sheer cost in human life that could entail, not just for Ukrainians, but also for Russians and for young Russians. And that was the point that I was trying to make earlier on in my speech today.
President Putin has around 150,000 troops massed on those borders. He has the attention of every Western leader already. There are already questions about whether Ukraine could ever join NATO. Hasn't he won already?
I think that he's certainly got everybody fixated on this question, but no, he hasn't, because what matters is the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine, and ultimately that is still for Ukrainians to determine. And what we don't want to see is a violent invasion that would take away one of the most important gains of my lifetime, which was the creation of a Europe whole and free, where, you remember in 1989, 1990, when the Berlin Wall fell, and there was this extraordinary, intoxicating moment when suddenly countries could choose their own destiny. And it is still the right of the Ukrainian people to decide what alliance they want to join, where they want to go, what their aspirations should be.
They don't have much choice.
And that will be extinguished.
They don't have much choice, though. If President Putin decides to invade Ukraine, they've got no military support. The West has been very clear that if the Russians invade, the West are not going to be in there fighting with them. Well, what the West has also said, and what the UK has said, is that we will support to the extent that we can, and we've been already giving them training through Operation Orbital, as you know. We've trained 22,000 Ukrainian troops, and we've taken those soldiers out again. But there, the 22,000 people who've been trained. We've given them 2,000 anti-tank weapons, the NLAWs, as you know, and plus some other stuff. It's not enough against the Russian army, though, is it? We're joining the Lithuanians and the Americans and others in helping them in that respect. But your fundamental point is right. It is true to say that in 2008, from the West, NATO could have made a decision to put Ukraine firmly on the path towards NATO membership. That didn't happen, and the Article 5 security guarantee isn't there. So we have to use the tools that we have, and those tools are economic sanctions against Russia, and the role of the UK has been to make sure that we impose the toughest possible sanctions, and that's what we're going to do, not just hitting the associates of Vladimir Putin, but also all companies of organizations of strategic importance to Russia. We're going to stop Russian companies raising money on UK markets, and we're even, with our American friends, going to stop them trading in pounds and dollars. That will hit very, very hard. But it's going to take time, though, for that to hit hard, isn't it? And even our own Intelligence and Security Committee says that Russians with links to President Putin are so well integrated into our business and social scene in the UK, it is almost impossible to untangle.
That's why we're making sure that we expose the ownership of the companies and with the register of beneficial interest. We're making sure that we open up the Russian doll of property ownership, of company ownership in London, and see who's behind everything. And we've got to do it, and we've got to hit very hard. Now, I've got to be absolutely frank with you, that may not be enough on its own. It will be very damaging and very difficult. What I don't think is well enough but it may not be enough to deter an irrational actor. And we have to accept at the moment that Vladimir Putin is possibly thinking illogically about this and doesn't see the disaster ahead. And I think it's vital for us all now to get over what a catastrophe it would be for Russia. People forget that Ukraine has already been engaged in conflict with Russians or Russian separatists in the east of the country for 8 years now. They've lost 14,000 people in the course of that conflict. They are inured to violence. They know about fighting. I believe that they will fight. I believe it will be a bloody and a protracted conflict. And what I would say to President Putin is, now is the moment to pull back. Now is the moment to engage in serious diplomatic conversation.
A bloody conflict, you say, but the message to Ukrainians is that if he does invade, they will be on their own. President Zelensky has accused the West today of appeasement.
I don't think that that's fair. I think that what we're trying to do is offer every possible support to Ukraine and to make sure that we hit Russia with the hardest possible package of economic sanctions, that we continue to offer support as we have to Ukraine and to Ukrainians, massive package of economic support that we've given, rising to 100 million now. And of course, vital point, what we're also doing is fortifying the eastern flank of NATO. So I think in Putin's imagination, a lot of his anxiety is about NATO and what he sees as the encroachment of NATO since the end of the Cold War. And I think what he wants to see is NATO push back. And he's going to see the exact opposite. What we're doing is putting UK forces, more UK forces into Estonia, more into Poland, more in the skies above Romania. If he thinks he's going to get less NATO as a result of this, he's totally wrong. He's going to get more NATO.
But he's not going to get more NATO soldiers into Ukraine. You said today that you have said that the shock of a Ukrainian invasion will echo around the world. Does that mean that you think that if Russia invades Ukraine, it could spill further, that they could invade other countries?
I think that it's very important that we still don't know what's going to happen. There's one person who knows what's going to happen. You asked at the beginning, is an invasion now inevitable? I can't look into the mind of Vladimir Putin. I can't peer into his soul. It's all down to him. But if he goes ahead and invades a sovereign European country, if he imposes maximum violence on Ukraine and at least temporarily succeeds, then that will be seen around the world. And I'm afraid people will draw the false conclusion that might is right and that aggression pays. And so what we've got to ensure is that it doesn't pay off. And even if a lightning war is initially successful, that over time, through our economic might, through all the pressure we can bring, we make sure that this venture does not succeed.
I need to ask you about something else serious that you're having to deal with at home. You have handed in your questionnaire to the Metropolitan Police about parties during lockdown in Downing Street, in government. What did you tell them?
I absolutely promise you, Sophie, as soon as I have something more to say about this matter, I will do so. But I can't give a running commentary of any kind, and it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right to do so. But as soon as I am able to say something, I assure you, you will be amongst the very first to know.
But if the police find that you have broken the law, broken your own laws that you wrote, will you resign? Can
I just undertake to make sure that as soon as I have something meaningful to say about this, which will be at the end of the process, I will make sure I do it to you, to the BBC, and I'll have a lot more to say about this in due course.
But it's not something that is being investigated. I'm asking you as a point of principle. You wrote those laws. You told the nation to abide by them. You went on television night after night and told them to abide by them. If you are found to have broken them, broken your own laws,
I understand the
will
question.
you stay in your job?
I understand the question you're raising, but any answer would be interpreted as a point of commentary about the process. I've got to leave
It's a matter of principle, surely. It's not a point of commentary.
I've got to leave it. You must forgive me. I can't comment about a process that's currently underway, and I won't.
It isn't a process underway. It's something in the future. The police are looking at something that has happened. I'm asking you about something that is in the future, because once the police come back and they tell us what happened and whether or not you broke the law, whether or not you will be fined, at that point you will have to decide.
Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to give you full and detailed answers to all this stuff. I genuinely can't, because we've got a process underway. There is not a jot I can say until it's done.
You can answer it though. I mean, you're choosing not to. It doesn't prejudice anything. The police, there's no jury involved. There's not a court trial. It's the police. It's a process, and you have handed in your questionnaire, so that is done. But you're obviously choosing not to. Were there parties in your flat during lockdown?
Can I just respectfully, humbly, and with all, I can't say anything more about this until the process is complete. It will be complete in, I hope, a reasonably short time. In the meantime, what we're focused on is, and quite ruthlessly, is trying to bring the world together at an absolutely critical moment here in Munich at the security conference, where a lot of people are meeting, to make sure that we have a united Western posture on the number one crisis in Europe, which is the threat to Ukraine.
Absolutely, but we have spoken about Ukraine. But you are the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and you're currently being investigated by the police. You have spoken about this in the Commons, for example, where you told MPs that all guidance was followed completely by Number 10. Do you still stand by that?
Sophie,
do you still stand by that?
We have a...
It's a simple question. It doesn't influence...
I know. I understand completely. We have a process that's underway. I've got to respect that. And in the meantime, we've got to get on not just with tackling what's going on in Ukraine. We've got to get on and delivering all the things that the British public want us to do. We've got to make sure that we bounce back from COVID properly.
But the reason I'm asking you that is because you've always... And I'm going to talk to you about... And I am going to talk to you... And I will talk to you about COVID, but it is a serious matter. You are being investigated. You're Prime Minister, as I say, and we haven't had much opportunity to ask you about it, which is why I'm asking you about it now. And I think people do find some of your explanations implausible. That lockdown drinks party in Downing Street, May 2020, it was 8 weeks into the first lockdown, and you went to that and you spent 25 minutes there. You told MPs that you implicitly believed it was a work event. People just don't understand how that could be.
I know, and I know you've got to answer these questions, but you're just going to have to wait until the process is complete. Literally not a bean I can tell you about that, and much as I would like to. What I think people might also be interested, and I appreciate that they're interested in that, but there's just nothing I can say about it. What I think people are also interested in is what we are doing to move beyond
but
COVID.
Why can't you say anything about it?
All the things we're doing to open up our economy, which I'll be outlining tomorrow, all the things that we're doing to make sure that we beat the COVID backlogs, that we bounce back as fast and effectively as possible, all the things that we're doing to bear down on crime and to unite and level up across the UK.
But you're not going to prejudice just by answering these questions. And as I say, we have not had much opportunity to ask you about them. Just by answering these questions, you're not going to prejudice the outcome of any police investigation. It is all done. Theresa May has said that either you didn't understand the rules that you wrote, or you just think they didn't apply to you. Which is it?
I'm afraid that I just have to focus on the stuff that we're focusing on, and that is making sure that we avert a tragedy in Ukraine, making sure that we move beyond COVID effectively, making sure that we deliver on all the promises
but it is important
that we
to
made.
talk about this.
And
I mean,
I understand why you want to ask about this.
But the image of the Queen, let me just ask you about the Queen. That image of the Queen at the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, there she was all on her own. She was following the rules. The nation was following the rules, and people don't understand why people in Downing Street weren't following the rules.
I understand why.
But it was really embarrassing. You had to apologise.
Of course, I understand why people want to ask about. I understand your curiosity. I totally accept it. But you're just going to have to accept for the time being. And you won't have long, all right? I hope. But for the time being, you're simply going to have to contain your interest in this.
You must have been very ashamed of that moment. That image of the Queen, you must have felt ashamed of that.
I will be saying a lot more about it in due course. But in the meantime, what we are focused on, and I think this is absolutely crucial for the future of the world, including the UK, is making sure that we do everything we can right now to protect a sovereign, independent European country from attack, violent and potentially devastating attack, that we do everything we can to take our country forward with a fantastic programme of investment, uniting and levelling up, fighting crime, encouraging people down the path of home ownership, investing in our country and in our society. And if you want to talk about the things that are going on at home, we are in the fortunate position. We're here in Germany, where they've done a wonderful job of fighting COVID. But the fact is that because of the vaccine rollout that we had in the UK, we've been able to come out faster from that pandemic than any other European country. We've been able to get on with reopening our economy so well that we have the fastest growth in the G7, not just for 21, but also
we
for
fell
22.
Further than anybody else at the start, didn't we, as you know?
Also for 22. We have unemployment virtually at record lows. We have youth unemployment definitely at record lows, and you have a government that is absolutely bursting with energy and enthusiasm. Energy and enthusiasm, yes, to answer your questions in due course, Sophie, but above all, to get on with our programme.
Okay,
and
but
we were elected on a massive manifesto.
You are here on the world stage.
And that is what we're doing.
And here you are on the world stage, but back at home you are being investigated by the police. You've got MPs calling for you to resign. You're living under the constant threat of a no confidence vote. Do you not think you're just burying your head in the sand over this?
I am fortunate to live in a democracy. I am fortunate to be the Prime Minister of a free, independent, democratic country where people can take that sort of decision and where I do face that kind of pressure. That's a wonderful thing. And what we're trying to do now is make sure that the people of Ukraine have that continued freedom and that they are able to continue to live in a democracy. And that's what matters to me, quite frankly. And I think that the UK, if you look back at what we've done over the last few months, we were among the first to send defensive weaponry to Ukraine. We were among the first to call out the plans of the Kremlin and to sound the warning about how severe it could be. We were the first to say that we really needed a very tough package of economic sanctions. And that is what we've got to do now. We've got to make sure that the world learns the lessons of 2014. And the lesson of 2014 is that you can't just let Vladimir Putin get away with it, and also that you can't continue your dependence on hydrocarbons. And the tragedy is that too many countries in Europe remain absolutely mainlining Russian oil and gas. And we need to wean ourselves off that.
I think a lot of people...
we have as you've said, we have an issue with Russian money in the city, and we've got to deal with that. But the much bigger issue.
And there are going to be lessons that will be learned quite clearly. There will be lessons, and there are going to be lessons.
An opportunity now for the whole of Europe to change what they do.
But there are going to be lessons quite clearly learned from Sue Gray's report when we see it in its entirety.
Yes,
we've only seen it in an update so far. But at the moment, you know, we don't even know what the police are looking at the moment. But at the moment, your poll ratings, I mean, you're as unpopular as John Major was. It's been damaging for your party, hasn't it? And hugely distracting.
But just to return to my earlier point, it is a privilege to serve in a democracy. And quite frankly, here in Munich at the International Security Conference, what people see when they look at Britain is a country that has brought the world together in having a tough stance on Vladimir Putin, that has been right. We've been vindicated in our anxieties about what's going on. We've led in supporting the people of Ukraine, and we will continue to offer leadership. We're the second biggest military player in NATO. We've massively increased our defence funding. We're in the
I
P5,
want to ask you about COVID.
And we are going to continue to do everything we can, because the risks are enormous right now, but what we want to see is continued stability and continued growth, prosperity for the British people.
I want to ask you what's coming up about COVID in the next week in England, but can I just ask you one question about Prince Andrew first of all? Is any public money going to be used in Prince Andrew's settlement with Virginia Giuffre?
Well, what I can tell you, I can't answer you questions about the process that's going on, the police process that's going on, and I certainly can't answer questions about the royal family.
But do you think public money should be used?
No Prime Minister.
But should public money be used?
No Prime Minister ever answers questions.
But should public money be used in his settlement?
No Prime Minister ever answers questions about the royal family, and quite right.
It's public money, though.
No, look, that's for you. It's not my job to answer questions about the royal family.
Let's talk about COVID. The people who run the NHS say it's too soon to scrap mandatory self-isolation for people who test positive for COVID and to scrap free COVID tests. Why are you ignoring them?
I think it's very important that we should remain careful, and we're certainly not asking people to throw caution to the winds. COVID remains, a dangerous disease, particularly if you haven't been vaccinated, and particularly if you're vulnerable. So please, everybody, there are still people who haven't been properly vaccinated. There's still people who haven't had their booster. Huge numbers have, but there are still people who haven't. So there is no case for complacency about this. But we've now reached a stage, thanks to the efficacy of the vaccine rollout, particularly the booster rollout, which we did voluntarily, by the way. If you compare most other European countries, it was amazing what the British people did. We've reached a stage where we think you can shift the balance away from state mandation, away from banning certain courses of action, compelling certain courses of action, in favour of encouraging personal responsibility. Is there a danger,
is there a risk that we lose the early warning signs by getting rid of free testing?
I want to make sure that we have capability to spot stuff and to snap back up as fast as we
What does that mean, capability?
I think we need resilience, but we don't need to keep, for instance, on testing, we don't need to keep spending at a rate of £2 billion a month, which is what we were doing in January.
But how are we going to spot it if we're not testing?
Because we will be testing at a much lower level, but I'm afraid what we can't do is continue with as the number of cases diminishes, and certainly the number of patients in hospital is thankfully coming down now, and the number of cases in ICU certainly way down. We're in a different world.
Do you rule out ever having?
And I think it is important that people should feel confident again, and that people should feel able to go back to work in the normal way. I do want to see our country really getting back on its feet, and the economic figures, as I said to you, are very encouraging. That's what we want, and we want the country. Plenty of businesses are investing. Plenty of international businesses are investing massively in the UK. I'm not saying that we should throw caution to the winds, but now's the moment for everybody to get their confidence back.
Have we seen the end of restrictions in England, at least? Will we never have to live under restrictions again for COVID?
I don't want to go back to that kind of non-pharmaceutical intervention. I want to be able to address the problems of the pandemic with a vaccine-led approach. That's what I want. But I'm afraid you've got to be humble, as I've often said, you've got to be humble in the face of nature.
Is one of the problems, though, I mean, if another variant came along, that it would be very hard for you to stand in front of a podium, go on national television, make big public addresses and ask people to make huge personal sacrifices again, because would they actually follow the rules?
I think the amazing thing about the UK population is the way we've all worked together, the way people have got vaccinated, the way that people have done the right thing, and it's been absolutely spectacular.
But after everything that's gone on in Downing Street and the investigations to lockdown parties, I'm just asking whether people would ever follow the rules again.
Great respect. Okay, 2 points. First of all, I'll answer all that when the time comes on that point. But on would people obey the rules? Will people look after themselves and other people? Look at the evidence. Look at what British people have done, and look at the way by getting vaccinated in the scale and pace that they did, everybody collectively helped to save lots and lots of lives. And I think that people's actions were fantastic. And so I'm very encouraged by what they did. But now is the time, and as I say, I don't want people to get completely the wrong idea. I'm not saying you can totally throw caution to the winds. COVID remains dangerous if you're vulnerable and if you're not vaccinated, but we need people to be much more confident and get back to work.
Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
The Prime Minister speaking to me yesterday afternoon in Munich. Well, let's round this off by talking to the Mirror's Pippa Crerar and the Spectator's Katie Balls again. Pippa, is it a legal or a political decision not to talk about the police investigation and what happens next?
Well, Boris Johnson is clearly, as your interview shows, on more comfortable territory talking about Ukraine and COVID. But as far as I can work out, there's no legal impediment to him talking about what's gone on in the whole partygate saga. He could be that he's received advice from his lawyers not to incriminate himself further by talking about things beyond which are already in the public domain. But it does seem that he is legally able to, should he want to. The issue here is a political impediment. He doesn't want to be focusing on partygate. He wants to be focusing on Ukraine, on COVID, on any other domestic issue which comes up, anything which distracts from what has been an incredibly difficult time for his leadership. And I think we'll continue to see him pushing forward, trying to tough it out and not talk about it until he really has no choice. Police report comes back, Sue Gray report comes back, and then he'll have to address the issues.
And Katie, MPs have been off the past week. They're back in Westminster tomorrow. We know that COVID is going to be dominating at the start of the week. What is the mood amongst MPs you talk to?
I think over the past week, it sort of seems slightly calmer around Boris Johnson, and people said, oh, his position's improving, but it has been recess, so MPs can't meet, they can't talk to one another, they can't plot. And I think that there is a divide in the Tory party. There are some who think this is not the time to have a leadership contest. Also, they're not particularly delighted by any of the potential candidates, but there are others who are deeply uncomfortable with the whole partygate saga. And that's why I think looking at whether there is a fine issued against the Prime Minister, and also whether MPs believe that he did mislead Parliament, is going to be quite critical to whether or not we do get a confidence vote and that 54 letters sent in.
And Pippa, you were the first to break this story back in, was at the end of November, the stories about what was going on in Downing Street at some of the parties. Is there more to come?
Well, there's certainly more allegations out there, and if we come across any evidence then that we think is in the public interest, then of course we'll publish them. And as we all know, the police has access to 300 photos and about 500 documents from Sue Gray's own inquiry. So there's a lot of information out there. If we come across it, we'll publish it. But there are these flashpoints that Katie's mentioned. There's a Sue Gray report coming out in full.
Because we've only seen the update, and we've seen very little of it.
And there's the police inquiry and what it decides to do, whether the Prime Minister's issued with a fixed penalty notice and whether the MPs act on the back of that. And also further down the line, this is the cost of living, massive cost of living pressures this spring, which would be a very difficult time for the government, even in ordinary circumstances. Plus, of course, the May elections, which might just be the moment that Tory MPs decide that their electoral asset has become an electoral liability. So it's going to be a really difficult spring ahead for the Prime Minister, regardless of the Partygate allegations.
But there are a lot of people out there who've just had enough of talking about parties anyway. I mean, is there a point at which the public just go, right, move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen the Prime Minister buy himself time, and actually by having these things hang over him, there is space for them to talk about other issues, Ukraine, the end of COVID restrictions. But the issue is, as we saw in the interview, it's still hanging over his head, and it cannot be a good thing while there's so many unanswered questions.
He does seem bullish, though, doesn't he?
Yes, and I think what you saw in that interview is classic Boris Johnson. The approach of this government to difficult issues and difficult questions is to double down, tough it out, obfuscate. We've seen that throughout their time in office, and you're seeing it again here. He is not going to give up power lightly. This is the man that as a boy wanted to be world king. He was going to try and hang on to it. And let's not forget, it's just 2 years since he won a massive majority. You can see why he feels that he's been elected by the people and should therefore be allowed to continue to serve the people. But there are huge pressures facing him in the months ahead, and whether he's able to do that and fulfil that ambition, only time will tell.
And what we have seen in the last few weeks is just how quickly things change in politics day by day.
Yes, and I think what the Prime Minister is trying to do is, put on this show of strength to actually say to his MPs, you can maybe get the numbers together for a vote, but I don't think you're going to win it. And is hoping, I think those around him are hoping that's going to put people off from even getting there. Because once you get into confidence votes, we've seen with Theresa May, it does weaken your position and really cast a big shadow on your premiership, even with a large majority.
Katie, Pippa, thank you both for joining me.